clearly. Good morning. I hope everybody is in their places and you can hear, all of you can hear me clearly. If there is anything, please inform me. Today we are going to learn about cyanotic congenital heart disease in children. The cyanotic congenital heart disease is one of the common congenital heart diseases which you come across, and you see at least 10% of, or little more than 10% of all congenital heart diseases in childhood are cyanotic congenital heart disease. The cyanosis occurs because there is an admixture of venous and arterial blood. During the developmental part of heart, there is a misalignment or malalignment between the venous and arterial side of the heart, and then the mixing occurs and then giving rise to as a cyanotic congenital heart disease. And to manifest as cyanosis, visible cyanosis, you should have at least a desaturated hemoglobin of 5%. Less than that will not be able to see a cyanosis. And it all depends on the hemoglobin concentration also. Normal hemoglobin concentration, 5% desaturated hemoglobin is good enough to present as cyanosis. But in anemic patients, cyanosis may not be present. The central cyanosis, we always try to distinguish between the central cyanosis and the peripheral cyanosis. The central cyanosis is the one which you see in most of these congenital heart diseases, that are cyanotic congenital heart diseases. The central cyanosis always denotes that there is the desaturated hemoglobin circulating in the central circulation. Whereas peripheral cyanosis is because of the decreased blood flow in the periphery, whereas in the central part of the circulation, the things are normal. So in the central cyanosis, one of the things which you always look for is a tongue. If the tongue is bluish, yes, it may be there is a central cyanosis. Or you just look at the conjunctival, palpebral conjunctiva. If it is congested, it's because of the polycythemia. So polycythemia, if it is present, then it is more of central cyanosis, but not a peripheral cyanosis. The cyanosis at the peripheries remains even, cyanosis at the peripheries remains even after warming. The peripheral cyanosis, when you warm the area, it disappears. Whereas in central cyanosis, even after warming, the cyanosis persists. Clubbing of the fingers in a long-standing central cyanosis is another feature to say that the child is having a central cyanosis and not a peripheral cyanosis. And these are all the features which you are going to look for in a children with a cyanotic congenital heart disease. The cyanotic congenital heart disease can be of two varieties. In the first variety, there is a decreased pulmonary blood flow. For example, in phallus tetralogy, pentalogy, pulmonary atresia, with VSD or with intact septum, tricuspid atresia, all these conditions have a decreased pulmonary flow. So in that case, the lungs are what you call polygamic. The vascular markings on chest X-ray is not seen. Whereas the other part of cyanotic congenital heart disease is with increased blood flow. Examples being transposition of the great arteries, truncus arteriosus, total anomalous pulmonary venous drainage, where you have an increased pulmonary blood flow, a plethoric lung on the X-ray. Okay. Now, how do you confirm the central cyanosis? So, by doing a clinical examination, which I have already told you earlier, about the various thing about the central cyanosis. The other thing is you do a pulse oximetry. Look at the oxygen saturation levels, and usually you measure it in the right upper limb, that is a preductal area, and compare with the left upper limb in the any lower limb. And then you do a blood gas analysis. Usually you do a sampling from the right radial artery. All these things will show you that there is a oxygen saturation. A low SpO2 level or low PO2 levels are the hallmark of a central cyanosis. The preductal and postductal oxygen saturation, which we use as a screening procedure in the neonatal period to identify a critical cyanotic heart disease early so that we can intervene early. And it's usually done, preferably done at or after 24 hours of age. That is before we discharge the newborn from the hospital. All newborns should undergo this screening test. In a sick newborns, of course, it can be done earlier. A difference of 3 to 7% in oxygen saturation between the preductal and postductal areas is significant and needs further evaluation immediately. Don't delay that, otherwise the child may come back to you with a critical phase. Then there is what you call as a hyperoxia test, which we do. So this is a test which will differentiate the cyanosis from cardiac causes from that of respiratory or other causes of cyanosis. The newborn baby is supplemented with 100% oxygen for 10 minutes. This is important. It has to be 100% oxygen and for 10 minutes. And then you do a blood gas prior to the oxygen supplementation, 100% oxygen supplementation. Then blood gas done after 10 minutes of oxygen supplementation so that you see the difference. In the normal, usually the PO2 will be around 70 millimeter of mercury. That is 95% of saturation if you do a pulse oximeter at the same time. When you give 100% oxygen for 10 minutes, the PO2 will increase to 300 millimeter of mercury. And PCO2 will be normal. That means that there is no respiratory problem. So once it reaches 300 millimeter and above, you know that it is normal. The cardiac malformation is not present. The pulmonary diseases, usually it is about 50 millimeter of mercury. Children are hypoxic because of the respiratory diseases like bronchiolitis, pneumonias, bronchopneumonias with a saturation of 85%. When you give 100% oxygen for 10 minutes, it goes up to more than 150 millimeter of mercury with a 100% saturation level. But it doesn't go up to 300 millimeter. And PCO2 in respiratory diseases is usually raised because the diffusion across the respiratory membrane will be defective. In neurological diseases, it's the same as a pulmonary disease. It's similar to that, but PO2 never reaches the 300 millimeters of mercury. Methemoglobinemia is a very rare disease, but one should consider as one of the differential diagnosis for a central cyanosis. Usually, there's 70 millimeters of mercury, 95% saturation as in normal people. But when you give 100% oxygen, it goes more than 200 millimeters, but doesn't reach 300 millimeters of mercury. And the PCO2 will be normal. And usually you have in a hereditary form, you have a family history of methemoglobinemia. And acquired form, there is a history of ingestion of nitrites and other substances which can cause methemoglobinemia. Now we are coming to the cardiac diseases, which is more important. Be more careful. There is something called as a parallel circulation, like transposition of the great arteries do have a parallel circulation, sometimes without any connection between the two circulations. In the parallel circulation, the systemic blood supply, systemic circulation is through pulmonary artery, the aorta connected to the right ventricle. So the saturation will be very low, 75%, and PaO2 will be less than 40 millimeter of mercury. And this is the one which causes the cyanosis. And even with 100% oxygen, because the oxygenation cannot improve because the pulmonary blood flow is abnormal, it is not flowing, right ventricle, it comes to the systemic circulation, not going into the pulmonary circulation, then the PO2 will not increase more than 50 millimeter of mercury. Respiratory PaCO2 will be normal in this condition. There is a mixing with a restricted pulmonary blood flow. Again, the PaO2 will be 40. PaO2 after oxygen supplementation will be 50. It doesn't improve. So that is the thing. Whereas with a normal pulmonary blood flow, mixing but normal pulmonary blood flow, then it is maybe 40 to 60. It can go up to 150, but it's always less than 100. Okay? So the saturation, if you are maintaining pulse oximeter, it may show normal, but you have to do a PaO2, study the PaO2 to know the differences. So when 100% oxygen for 10 minutes cannot improve the PaO2 beyond certain levels, you know that there is a cardiac cyanotic congenital heart disease in the child. Now, let us come to one of the commonest form of cyanotic congenital heart disease. We all see a commonest is a tetralogy of Fallot or Fallot's tetralogy. It accounts for 10% of all congenital heart disease. One of the conotruncal family of heart lesions, where the lower part of the conotruncus, where it attaches to the ventricles before the division into pulmonary artery and aorta, then there is an abnormality or a maldevelopment occurring in this area and giving rise to tetralogy of Fallot. So this is the components of the thing, and you can see that there is a infundibular hypertrophy, and then there is a VSD here, just below the aorta, attached to the aorta. This is the aorta. You can see the VSD here, and the blood from the right ventricle, very less amount goes through the pulmonary artery and into the lungs, but it goes directly into the aorta. Okay, the blood from left atrium, which receives the oxygenated blood from the lung, will come into the left ventricle and also it flows. The mixing of blood occurs in the aorta. So the aortic flow will be deoxygenated. It is a mixed blood in the aorta and which goes into all the other areas. Anterior deviation of the infundibular septum, which separates the aortic and pulmonary outflow, is the main abnormality in the development of the Fallot's tetralogy. That is the basic thing. And when the infundibular septum deviation occurs, it causes an obstruction of the pulmonary outflow, and then it resulting in an infundibular hypertrophy, and sometimes maybe also with a valvular stenosis also. And then because that anterior deviation of the infundibular septum is more developed, then you get what you call as a malalignment ventricular septal defect, just below the aorta. And this ventricular septal defect is directly opening into the aortic root. And then there is a dextroposition of the aorta. It moves when that septum is not very well developed. Aorta moves to the right side, and then it overrides both the ventricles. Practically, you can call it as a double outlet ventricle going into aorta. Of course, we don't call it as such, but both the ventricles are opening into the aorta. But the right ventricle also opens into the pulmonary artery. So the mixing of blood occurs in the aorta. And because of the obstruction to the right ventricular outflow, then there is usually a right ventricular hypertrophy. So the main defect is the malalignment ventricular septal defect, infundibular stenosis or hypertrophy, and then consequence of these two, you have a overriding of the aorta and a right ventricular hypertrophy. Clinical manifestations, cyanosis may not be present at birth in mild infundibular hypertrophy because the child is maintaining the pulmonary circulation well, oxygenated blood comes back, and so the PO2 in the systemic circulation will not be very low. Maybe it will be around 60% or 50%. So cyanosis may not occur. But usually as the child grows up by the age of 6 months, the infundibular hypertrophy becomes more and more and causes more obstruction and then diversion of the right ventricular blood into the aorta, and the saturation in the systemic circulation keeps on coming down, and that's when the child develops a cyanosis. The older children who have not undergone surgery, because nowadays all children who are born with cyanotic congenital heart disease, they undergo surgery or interventions early in the neonatal period or in early infancy. Usually those children who misses out on surgery in early infancy usually go on to develop a clubbing, a conjunctival congestion, secondary to the polycythemia and a dusky blue skin. Exertional dyspnea with intermittent squatting will be present in the older children. Because of the abnormality, they can't exert themselves, they can't run, they can't climb up the stairs. They have to take rest in between. And when they take rest, they usually squat. So intermittent squatting will be seen in these children. And when they squat, it's one of the physiological effect of squatting is that it blocks the femoral vein flow, venous flow, and also it also constricts the femoral artery. When it blocks the venous flow towards the heart, that means that the flow into right ventricle decreases. When the flow into the right ventricle decreases, the shunt, right to left shunt, also decreases. So the saturation in the systemic circulation improves. The other effect is a femoral artery constriction when you squat, and then it increases the systemic vascular resistance. The systemic vascular resistance is when it's increased, it reflects on the aortic pressures and the left ventricular pressures. So it prevents the right to left shunt, or it decreases the right to left shunt, so the desaturation. So the child, once the saturation improves, the child gets up and goes for play, but then comes back again, squats again after some time, because the right to left shunt has established like before. Then another feature is a paroxysmal hypercyanotic spells. The clinical manifestation, the hypercyanotic spells, I will come a little later, I will explain to you. The clinical manifestation, the pulses are normal, there are no other abnormalities. Yes, in older children who have not had a surgery in the newborn period or in early infancy, there will be a right ventricular hypertrophy. Because of the right ventricular hypertrophy, there may be a precordial bulge. Left parasternal heave is also one of the clinical findings. That is because of the right ventricular hypertrophy and then pulsating, and which can be palpable in the left parasternal area. And you have a tapping apical beat at the right ventricular apex. Right ventricular apex. And then, of course, there is a single second heart sound. Pulmonary heart sound is usually not heard. In a mild infundibular hypertrophy or a mild pulmonary valve stenosis, there may be a muffling of the pulmonary component. Okay? But in a severe thing, the pulmonary component is completely absent. So you hear that the second sound is being single. Then there may be a systolic thrill, and you sometimes hear ejection systolic murmur. Very rarely you may hear a holosystolic murmur of VSD, but it is not common. This is their X-ray. once you have seen the child and examined, go ahead and take an X-ray. This is the characteristic feature of in the left side X-ray, which shows a boot-shaped heart. That is because of a predominantly a right ventricular hypertrophy, boot-shaped. And if you look at the lungs, you don't make out any the markings, vascular markings. Usually the vascular markings in a normal X-ray, it should be seen up till the end of the periphery of the lung field. But here it is not there. Whereas if in the right side X-ray, you can see that there is a boot-shaped heart, but you see the pulmonary vasculature is going up to the end of it. Yes, this is more of a increased pulmonary blood flow with a phallus tetralogy, with the infundibular. So what has happened here is there are multiple anastomotic channels have been formed in the pulmonary artery area, where the branches of pulmonary artery, and it looks as if it is a plethoric lung field. The ECG is another investigation which you do, and usually you see that the child will have a right axis deviation. Lead one, there is a deep S wave, and AVF, there is a tall R wave, in V1, which are all suggestive of a right ventricular hypertrophy and a right axis deviation. Of course, is the echocardiogram picture, which will tell you the defect, the aorta overriding both left ventricle and the right ventricle. Okay, and then of course you can't make out the pulmonary artery where it is going, which can be in a different views. You can determine how much is the ventricular hypertrophy and how much is the obstruction, and also you can do a Doppler studies to know the flow pattern inside the heart and confirm all the abnormalities the child is having. Of course, this is a flow chart. It may be a little difficult for you to make out everything. This is only, this should have come, I will come to this thing afterwards. Okay. Now, hypercyanotic spell. Hypercyanotic spell is a characteristic feature of phallus tetralogy, and it very commonly occurs in almost all children with phallus tetralogy, and to a certain extent, some of the other cyanotic congenital heart disease where pulmonary artery is compromised, the development of the pulmonary artery is compromised. Usually, suddenly the child becomes more cyanotic, it becomes more tachycardic, there is an incessant crying because of the coronary artery supply will become less and less with more deoxygenated blood. So the child may have something of a myocardial ischemic changes. And then there is an autosensorial because the oxygen supply to the central nervous system is become less and less, may develop seizures, hypoxic seizures. And then sometimes the child, instead of being a hypercyanotic, may become pale and limp in a shock like this. Very rarely, stroke can occur with a cerebral venous thrombosis, and stroke can occur, and very rarely, even death can occur because of the hypercyanotic spell. And this is the cycle which leads on to hypercyanotic spell. What exactly happens is either there is a tachycardia as an initiating feature. The child usually gets up from his sleep, starts crying. When the child starts crying, there is a tachycardia, there is an increased cardiac output, then there is an increased venous return, and then there is increased right to left shunt, increased systemic desaturation, and PO2 and pH is decreased, and then there is an increased carbon dioxide, and hyperopnea occurs because of this. Then the cycle continues, vicious cycle. So the child becomes more cyanosed, more desaturated, and the child goes in for unless it is broken, it is interrupted early. The management of hypercyanotic spell is that place the child supine or sometimes even on the abdomen, give 100% oxygen. Yes, to improve the, whether it really helps, we are not very sure about it, but give 100% oxygen. And then you have to, in the lying posture or in the, when the child is prone on his abdomen, you have to put the child in the squatting position. That is, hip is flexed, knee is flexed, and hold him in that position for some time. That decreases the venous blood flow into the right side of the heart, and it increases the peripheral systemic arterial resistance, systemic vascular resistance, and it decreases the right to left shunt. That is the first thing which you have to do. The position decreases the venous return and, of course, thereby decreasing the right to left shunt. Calm the child. The child is highly irritable, incessantly crying. If when the child is doing that, so calm the child. Don't do too many procedures, painful procedures for this child when the child has a hypercyanotic spell, like putting a cannula or taking a blood sample. All those should be minimized to the requirement. Sedation has to be given to calm the child. The sedation which we use is a morphine sulfate in a dose of 0.1 milligram per kg per dose. Either you can give it as IV, if you cannot get an IV, you can give an IM, or even a subcutaneous. The dose can be repeated after 5 minutes. The morphine is a good drug to be used in the child with hypercyanotic spell because it suppresses the respiratory center. You know that is one of the adverse effects of a morphine, but here it is useful and decreases the hyperopnea. So the faster breathing will come down and it decreases the right to left shunt. Ketamine can also be used in the place of morphine. In addition to the sedation, ketamine increases the systemic vascular resistance and thereby limiting the right to left shunt. Midazolam, fentanyl have also been used as a part of sedation. But morphine is the best drug in this situation. Treat metabolic acidosis, yes. Severe hypoxemia, tissue oxygenation is less, more bicarbonate is utilized, hydrogen ion is produced. So there is a metabolic acidosis. A severe metabolic acidosis, it has to be corrected. That is particularly if the pH is less than 7. Then you give a propranolol, which relaxes the infundibular area of the right ventricle. You give 0.1 milligram per kg, given slowly to a maximum of 0.2 milligram per kg. You can use phenylephrine, which increases the peripheral vascular resistance, which is also can be tried. Or sometimes some people use phenylephrine as a first line and then use propranolol as a second line of vasoactive substances. Intubation and ventilation if necessary, and if the child develops convulsions, you may have to use anticonvulsants. The complications of phytosteatology. Polycythemia because of the chronic hypoxemia. Polycythemia occurs because it has to maintain the circulating hemoglobin or circulating oxygen concentration. Higher the hemoglobin levels, higher the oxygen concentration in the circulation. But this polycythemia can lead on to thrombotic episodes, particularly the cerebral venous thrombotic episodes are quite common and can cause strokes. Bacterial endocarditis, like in any other congenital heart disease, bacterial endocarditis is another complication which you have to look for. Brain abscess, yes, thrombotic, necrotic area in the brain, and then secondary infection, and that can become a cerebral abscess. And congestive cardiac failure, if there are other anomalies are present. Otherwise, usually children with tetralogy of Fallot will not develop congestive cardiac failure. Treatment is the surgical correction. That is the mainstay of the thing, but once you have diagnosed Fallot's tetralogy, you have to improve the pulmonary circulation. If there is particularly if there is a moderate to severe infundibular hypertrophy. So you create an artificial shunt between the systemic circulation and the pulmonary circulation. From the arch of the aorta or from the descending aorta to the left pulmonary artery, you make a shunt, which is called as a Blalock thoracic shunt, and it has been the palliative surgery for many years now. And then, of course, you go for a total correction if it can be done in the immediate neonatal period or in early infancy. You have to dissect out the infundibular hypertrophy part, muscular dissection, remove it, then your closure of the VSD has to be done, and then, of course, if there is a associated pulmonary stenosis, the pulmonary valvectomy should be done. So that is the total correction, and with the total correction, the outlook for prognosis for is fairly good, and usually they survive up to the age of 40 to 50 years. Now we will come to the other cyanotic congenital heart disease. We'll just look at some of the congenital heart diseases. Pulmonary atresia is the next one. Atresia means there is no pulmonary valve. It has not been formed at all. So if there is no pulmonary valve, then there is no flow from right ventricle to the pulmonary artery. Sometimes this can also be associated with Fallot's tetralogy instead of just an infundibular hypertrophy. There may be a pulmonary atresia. If it is associated with VSD, admixture occurs at the ventricular level. This is what you call as a severe or extreme form of Fallot's tetralogy. If there is no VSD, the admixture occurs at the atrial level through the foramen oval, which is usually smaller one. Sometimes they may have a ASD. In both instances, the pulmonary flow has to be maintained through a patent ductus arteriosus. In the first 24 hours, the ductus is still open. Only in the first 2 to 3 days, the ductus closes and then all the child deteriorates because there is no pulmonary flow at all. And the pulmonary foramen oval may not be able to manage it. So once you diagnose pulmonary atresia, you have to keep the duct open with a prostaglandin infusion until a definitive surgical intervention is undertaken. So that means that these two, VSD, pulmonary atresia with VSD, or what you call as a severe or extreme form of Fallot's tetralogy, or isolated pulmonary atresia, both are neonatal emergencies. It has to be diagnosed and dealt in the first few days of life. The hyperoxia test is positive in both instances. The ductus has to be kept open by infusion of prostaglandin E1 or E2, any one of them can be used. But in practice, we use more of prostaglandin E1. Child has to be transferred to a tertiary center at the earliest. That is because not every hospital will have a facility, but we can diagnose the pulmonary atresia or a severe form of Fallot's tetralogy in the newborn period by doing the hyperoxia test, ECG, a chest X-ray, and the echocardiogram, and then refer the child to a tertiary center where a definitive surgical intervention is possible. Surgical reconstruction depends on the anatomical findings of the pulmonary artery size, the type of atretic pulmonary valve, and the size of the right ventricle and the muscle mass. So depending on this, you plan out what should be done. If reconstruction is not possible, palliative Blalock Taussig is an alternative to improve the pulmonary blood flow, like you do it in any other conditions. Direct connection of vena cavas with pulmonary arteries, bypassing the right ventricle, right atrium and the right ventricle. You know, the inferior vena cava, superior vena cava, they come and enter into the right atrium. That part of it is taken and attached to the main pulmonary artery. That is, if the pulmonary artery size is good. Otherwise, you attach it to the one of the branches of the pulmonary artery. So they go by the name as a Glenn procedure, okay, or as a modified Fontan procedure. That's another. They are two different, but have the same effect in correcting the cyanosis and oxygen deanesty and improving the systemic oxygen saturation level. Tricuspid atresia is another common condition where the tricuspid valve, which connects the right atrium and the right ventricle, is not there. It is absent, completely absent. This is another drug-dependent neonatal emergency. You have to diagnose early and then take all the measures which I have discussed earlier with pulmonary atresia. Same thing holds good here also. The venous blood flow from the right atrium passes through the foramen ovum or atrial septal defect. Right ventricle is hypoplastic if there is no VSD. So the admixed blood flows through the aorta and pulmonary circulation has to be maintained through a patent ductus. Cyanosis at birth may be mild depending upon the VSD and the pulmonary flow. The apex is of left ventricular type. This is one of the congenital heart disease, cyanotic congenital heart disease, which involves the right side of the heart but has a left axis deviation. The second sound is single. There may be a holosystolic murmur. Failed hyperoxia test, left axis deviation ECG confirms the probability of a tricuspid atresia. Echo will confirm and identifies the other associated anomalies. Blalock Taussig shunt to improve the pulmonary circulation. Go ahead and do that. And then you can do a balloon septostomy, which we also do in a transposition of the great arteries to open up the ASD and so that the right ventricle blood flows into the left atrium and then into the systemic circulation. Blalock Taussig shunt to improve the pulmonary circulation. Rashkin bidirectional Glenn shunt is another palliative procedure which can be done. Modified Fontan, as was described in the previous condition, that is the pulmonary atresia, can also be a definitive surgical intervention in a child with a tricuspid atresia. Transposition of the great arteries. This is the one condition where there is increased blood flow. The previous conditions, there is a decreased pulmonary blood flow. This is a cyanotic heart disease with normal or increased pulmonary blood flow. The aorta arises from the right ventricle and pulmonary artery arises from the left ventricle. You just imagine that both becomes like a two closed circuits. So it's results in what you call as a parallel circulation instead of a sequential circulation in the normal hemodynamics, cardiac hemodynamics. So this gives rise to a lot of problems unless there is a certain amount of mixing between the two parallels, which is necessary for the survival of the child. There may be a VSD, there may be a PDA, or there may be a ASD. If it is not there, you have to create an ASD, like I explained to you previously about the Rashkin procedure, where you do a catheterization and a balloon atrial septostomy and create an artificial ASD, so the blood flow occurs on to the other side. There is a mixing of the cyanotic and the acyanotic part of the circulation. Or keep the PDA open. And that is only a temporary measure with a prostaglandin E1 until a balloon septostomy is done, which is also a palliative. And then the definitive surgery for more often there is associated pulmonic stenosis. There may be a increased problem with the transmission of the great arteries. Of course, as I said, prostaglandin infusion will be necessary to keep the ductus patent. Egon and abnormality on the X-ray with a narrow pedicle, because usually the aorta and pulmonary are not side by side, whereas here it is anterior and posterior position. So when you take an X-ray, it becomes a pedicle becomes a narrow, whereas normally it is wider. Pedicle is wider. So when you see a narrow pedicle and an Egon and view of the heart, then you know that you are dealing with a transposition of the great arteries. Arterial switch is a definitive surgical procedure, and it can be done even in the neonatal or in the early infantile period, so that the circulations can be corrected, so that the systemic circulation becomes almost normal and the life expectancy will become longer. I think that's it about the cyanotic congenital heart disease. Thank you very much. And now, still there is 15 minutes or 10 minutes. And then if you have any questions? Where is your chat? Okay, 1 minute. Yeah. Any questions from my students? I have opened the chat, but I don't see any. There are 137, Rishita V and other people, but I don't see any questions. You don't have any doubts? Any doubts? Thank you. Thank you very much.